When you've got a strong relationship with your patients, they are more apt to continue through when there's a financial issue, and they're also a lot more apt to communicate what they're going through in order to enable you to continue to help them within the dental setting.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Raving Patients Podcast. And as a reminder, I want to thank my sponsors, both the Doc Sites and Dental Intelligence, for their support, allowing me to do this as often as I do. And I also want to remind everybody about my event in September 29th and 30th. It's called Supercharge Your Dental Practice, focused on the business and marketing side of your practice. For more information, check out www.superchargeyourdentalpractice.com for more information about the event. So recently I was at the AAPD meeting in Orlando, Florida. For those that don't know, that's the pediatric dental meeting. It's every year annually, right around the Memorial Day holiday. It's that Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and I was introduced to a young lady who really impressed me. And one of the things I like doing on my podcast is to kind of make those who are unknown more known to the industry. So I met Lana. Lana really impressed me, like I said, and I said, hey, why don't you come on my podcast? And here we are just a couple weeks later, and she's going to be a guest. Today's episode is called Successfully Tackling Economic Uncertainty. The name of her company is NMG Practice Solutions, and I want to welcome to the Raving Patients Podcast, Lana Rivera. Lana, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Len. Happy to be here.
So let me briefly read your bio, which is really short, but I'll have you expand on it a little bit. But with over 20 years of experience within the dental field, Lana has been able to not only navigate practices through economic twists and turns successfully, but has also created thriving environments with record-breaking numbers that have enabled doctors and staff to avoid burnouts while finding the joy in dentistry again. So that's a great short bio. Thank you so much for that. But why don't you kind of let people just talk about your background a little bit? I know you have 20 years of experience. You've gone from every different spot in the dental space. And then how you got to where you are basically doing your own consulting now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started many years ago in management and oral surgery. And one of the things that I really loved and enjoyed about it, the complexities and how it changed people's lives. Anything from full mouth reconstruction to just something cosmetic. So that enabled me to continue to go from management position to management position in different scenarios that I personally really enjoyed.
Talk about how you transitioned from working in a dental office to becoming a coach, consultant. I don't know what you refer to yourself as, but how you help other practices.
Yep, I consider it consultant. The transition, one day I was ready to make the jump. It was something that I had thought about for a really long time. Every single management position that I was in, I always noticed that there was similar struggles, anything from accounts receivable to treatment plan acceptance, doctors feeling extremely stressed out and frustrated. And one day I was brave enough to make that jump, and I wanted to help not just one doctor from sitting in that management chair, but I wanted to create something that would help me reach and help as many doctors as possible.
And that's great, but I think there's a lot of people out there who have similar experiences and have the desire or the wants or the needs to do something differently. How did you decide to just wake up one day, hey, I'm going to be a consultant? There's a big jump for that. So can you at least touch base on that? So those that are listening to this podcast who may be, I don't want to say maybe struggling or maybe frustrated with the way things are going as a manager of a practice per se and want to do something differently. I think that's a really important thing I just want to touch on right now is how you made that jump to say, okay, I was in management, now I want to do it on my own.
I think you hit a word that I personally love, and it's listen. So in the dental space specifically, we are trained and we are taught to listen to our patients, what their buying motive is, what their struggles are, what their wants are, what their goals are. And so what I learned from switching from listening to patients, what their wants were and what their buying motives were, was listening to employers at the time, of expressing their frustrations, expressing what they felt like that they couldn't bridge certain gaps together. So that's something that I personally enjoy. I like any sort of client that I come across, any sort of vendor that I come across. The number one thing that I do is actively listen to their concerns. And I felt like that ability helped me be able to feel comfortable with that jump because of all the background and the history that I had with it.
You mentioned something really important that I just want to touch base on. And I've talked about this a lot during my podcast over the years. And I'm in season 6 now. So I've done over 300 episodes, is you mentioned active listening. Active listening is so important. I teach it in my classes I give on the art of the sale, because active listening actively shows the person that you're speaking with that you're listening to them. And one of the things I learned over time, very early in my dental career, that I was not a good listener. And I actually took listening classes. I had a listening coach who taught me how to active listen. And now I'm a terrific listener. I always like to joke the only person that says I don't listen to her is my wife, because I have selective hearing for her. But I love active listening because it shows the person that you are listening to them. And there's all things about head nods and making sure that you show them that you're listening to them. So I'm a huge fan of active listening. I know you didn't have it on your list of topics you wanted to talk about, but I think that's an amazing thing to discuss.
Yeah, absolutely. What we learned in the dental space was knee to knee, toe to toe, eye to eye. And it's the same thing when it comes to working with clients in the dental space, whether you're working with managers or you're working with doctors specifically, active listening. And I feel like that's something that more people could excel in and learn, because like you said, it's not something we come automatically with. It's an art we develop.
That's great. And the topics that we want to talk about are very business oriented, which is great because, as you know, my events in September, it's on the business and marketing side. So these topics really hit home for me. That's why I wanted to have the meeting that was not clinical based. It's marketing and business based, because these topics are not really discussed at many meetings. So let's start off by discussing some of these things. Obviously the economy is in a state of flux right now. Interest rates are really high. There's some issues with where people are getting their money from, jobs, people are losing jobs, a lot of layoffs in the industries. So let's talk about how to recession-proof your practice, or what your feeling is about ensuring that your practice survives, because I do feel at some point in the near future, we are going to have some sort of recession in the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And history repeats itself. We went through it in 2007 through 2010, and I navigated through that time within a dental practice with multiple locations in the middle of a startup. One of the number one things, along with marketing, that helps you navigate through a recession is your relationship with patients. Dentistry is not just working on individuals' mouths and individuals' teeth. You're working on patients and their emotions and all the things that they go through. So one thing in specific is I've noticed when you focus on your relationship with your patients, whether you're in pedo, whether you're in oral surgery in general, periodontics, when you've got a strong relationship with your patients, they are more apt to continue through when there's a financial issue. And they're also a lot more apt to communicate what they're going through in order to enable you to continue to help them within the dental setting.
I agree with that a lot. If you had to guess where you think things are going to be? I mean, you're obviously doing consulting now with practices. How are you consulting them specifically when it comes to this particular topic? Do you feel there's going to be a recession? How are you teaching them to plan for it, basically, is what I'm asking.
Team training, 100% team training, motivating team members to be engaged with their patients, to listen to their patients. Again, we're going back to active listening, verbiage, understand your patient's buying motive. Patients can, whether they've got all the money in the world or they live on a very restricted income, being able to identify that and not wait for a recession to hit in order to present financial options. Go ahead and implement that now, so that when people's finances and patients' finances become tighter, you're already prepared on how to accommodate in a difficult situation.
Got it. And you talked about patient financing or way patients are going to pay. Again, not something we wanted to talk about here, but I think it goes to the actual increasing case acceptance in general, or treatment plan acceptance in general. Where do you recommend practices go on the financing side of things?
One thing that I've actually noticed in certain regions is doctors are offering low-paying financing options through companies that basically give the office pennies at a time. So I encourage our clients to go ahead and research their financial options, whether it's LendingTree, it's Wells Fargo, it's Care Credit. Find out the percentage that's going to be deducted from the patient's charged amount, and also be prepared and make sure that you're asking the right questions. If somebody's crown is $1,500 and we get 10% knocked off of that, are we going to get that remaining balance, deposited into my bank account the next day or within 48 hours? So definitely education is everything when it comes to offering financial options to the patient to make sure it helps the patient, but it's not hurting the practice at the same time.
How do you recommend practices handle third-party financing when they're an insurance-based practice?
In my opinion, I feel like there needs to be a financial cap, meaning not necessarily cap, but a minimum. If the treatment plan is going to be $15,000, so to speak, typically less than, I don't think it's the right choice for doctors to go ahead and offer specifically care credit, for instance, depending on the plan that you're offering. You're already getting such a discounted rate. You want to be very cautious and you want to be very careful on further discounts that you're providing.
Yeah, I agree. It's always a difficult thing because I teach third-party financing. I teach a class called The Art of Third-Party Financing, which is an hour plus workshop on which companies. There's about 10 different companies I speak about. And one of the questions I get afterwards, and I didn't have this issue as a practice owner because I was not in insurance. But when you're taking insurance, it's very difficult to take a hit on the fee you're taking from the insurance company and then take a hit further. There's not a whole lot of money left over, but it's frustrating because sometimes patients need it. So it's one of those big dilemmas in the industry on how to handle that. So you mentioned a couple, and again, off the topic here, you mentioned a couple of third-party financing. I think you mentioned lending tree or lending club, care credit. But there's a lot of them in there. One I would throw out, I don't even know if you know it exists, is a company called WiseTac, WISETACK, WiseTac. And WiseTac takes out 4.5%. So it's a very low interest to the practice, which I like. Just as someone who speaks to practices about this, you may want to look into that one as well, just to give an idea. A little shout out to one of the sponsors for me. So anyway, let's talk about what I think is really one of the ways to make more money. You know, you can only make money a couple ways: to do more dentistry or lower your overhead. I mean, that's it. You know, raise your fees or lower your overhead. Increasing your treatment plan acceptance is one of those ways. So can you talk about some of the ways that you talk to your clients about how to increase their treatment plan acceptance?
Number one things that comes to mind, aside from the typical, your documentation, your intraoral cameras, having that up on a TV and making sure that those visible things that we can see, that takes an untrained eye, your patient sees it as well. The other thing is anybody who is going over your treatment plans, their personal relationship with finances needs to be strong, because a lot of times what gets into the way of the treatment plan acceptance with patients is that the staff member themselves are not comfortable with the dollar amount. I've seen it as low as $500. I've seen it $10,000. I've seen it $25,000. That's something that as a practice owner, you want to make sure that your staff not only is supporting and bought into your diagnosis, they believe in your diagnosis and they're comfortable talking finances, and their own personal feelings isn't going to get in the way of transpiring that.
Interesting. How do you feel about a dentist who wants to discuss finances and treatment planning with a patient?
That's a trick question. I have clients that do that. I will tell you that I don't necessarily love it. And the reason why is because the patient learns they can bypass Margaret, that's at the front desk, who's held accountable for the schedule, and that she can circumvent and she can go to the doctor directly. And a lot of times the doctors will sometimes cave and they'll go ahead and give additional discounts. My personal strategy is doctor diagnoses, doctor does the work. He doesn't need to worry about the finances. We're going to get Margaret to close the case.
So what if I was to tell you that I had 85% case acceptance doing it myself for 15 years?
I feel like you're not the norm, and that's a good thing.
But I teach it because I was great at it. And, you know, I was very good. I felt I had an office manager when I bought the practice who I would go in, speak to the patient. Patient would get really excited about the treatments. And she would walk in, I would leave, and then she would say, "Oh, they changed their mind or weren't ready." I'm like, something's not right here. So I was able to get rid of her after about a year plus in practice. And I didn't have anybody else to replace her, so I did it myself. And I was really, really successful at it. And so I just kept doing it, and I never tried to replace myself. So that's why I was curious your thoughts on that. So
I hear them talking numbers down. Don't talk numbers down.
a lot of times we want to be able to close the case, so we're giving additional discounts depending on how, you know, it's all about eye movements. Look, I talk about something called disarming the patients. You have to disarm the patient to get them ready to buy from you. And there's a point where they're going to accept treatment. And if you can make it affordable to them, very few people are going to say no. You have to disarm them to get to that point where you can do those things. So something else you wanted to talk about was productive scheduling. So talk to me about what you mean by that.
Productive scheduling. There is a big difference between a busy schedule and a productive schedule. And I tell this to the teams that we train when it comes to verbiage and productive scheduling. There is nothing more deflating than walking into an office and seeing a busy schedule. A busy schedule is you've got your seat crowns at 7:30 in the morning and you've got a little anterior composite right after that. There's no meat and potatoes. So productive scheduling is where we go in and we train our team members to go ahead and make sure that every single day, to the best of their ability, reaches their goal so that the doctor can see something attainable. They're not feeling frustrated, like they're getting burnt out on their deliveries or their consults. And that's going to help make it a more enjoyable environment for the staff and for the doctor.
And I agree with that. I mean, I think there's a big difference between being productive and being busy. You can be busy and make no money. I mean, you have days like that, but you want to be able to schedule. Is there a certain way you recommend scheduling? I know everybody has their own ideas on how they want things scheduled out. Do you have a specific way you prefer to do it?
Typically, I always recommend the first procedure of the day and the first procedure after lunch are going to be your high dollar productive scheduling. That way the doctor's fresh first thing in the morning. You're fresh right after eating. You don't want to have a big root canal unless it's an emergency, at 4:00 in the afternoon. So that's typically how we go ahead and do it.
And any other way? You said productive at the first thing in the morning, productive right after lunch, and then you fill the schedule in as needed then at that point?
Yeah, that's correct. So consults, your deliveries, your ortho checks, composites, smaller things.
Got it. So another topic you wanted to talk about, and I think it's really important nowadays to talk about it is there's a lot of shortages in staff. It's very difficult to hire team members if you lose one. I was extremely fortunate. I did not lose any of my team members during COVID. Everybody stayed. When I sold the practice, one of the hygienists the only hygienist we hired or had been with for 10 years had to leave because of a medical problem. And it took the new owner of my practice quite a long time to find a replacement hygienist. So she was doing her own hygiene, which I could never do. I did not enjoy doing hygiene. That's something that I really would rather not do. But she likes doing it, so she did it. But staff shortages can cause all sorts of issues in the practice, from decrease in production to just making everybody work that double hard to replace that staff member. So how do you recommend teams stay efficient during shortages when they have one?
One of the ways is being cross-trained. Clinical side, if they're a dental assistant, they understand the functions of the front desk, what it needs to go ahead and schedule productively, what it takes to go ahead and get patients confirmed and move around if need be. The other aspects that we've seen works is also outsourcing responsibilities that have nothing to do with patient relationship and patient communication. That way, if you're short-staffed or if you're staffed on quality individuals in the practice, every single person that's in the practice can focus on that patient relationship and make sure that they can get scheduled, they can become productive and manage that through while being shorthanded.
Now, obviously, it depends where the person is missing from the office. Obviously, a front office team is you can replace those with virtual people using virtual services or remote services, which there are an abundance of those. Obviously, if you're missing a hygienist, it's difficult to replace them without hiring a temp per se, at least in the beginning. And other team members, dental assistants and such, I mean, you have to make up for that as well. Do you recommend any type of remote services for any of your clients in any way, shape, or form?
Typically insurance services, yes. Right, best responsibilities, yes.
Perfect. So there's one more topic you want to talk about, but I also want people to kind of know where you work with, how you work with practices, kind of what you do for them. So the last thing you wanted to talk about was, which I think is a big topic nowadays, is when and how to know when you cut insurance companies. Obviously, practice, there's a lot of practices out there that are very insurance dependent, and they think that if they cut insurances, they're going to lose patients, which will happen. Don't get me wrong. Okay. But if you're so booked out that you can't get anybody in, my feeling is you drop the lowest insurance companies, and you'll have more time. You'll actually work less and make more money. So can you talk about how you analyze a practice to determine when and if they're ready and how you prepare them for that?
It definitely is a hot topic, right? Insurance, the doctors work as hard as they do and give the results that they give. It's frustrating. It's deflating with the low insurance fees. So like you were saying, Lynn, number one, when you get so booked out, you can begin to target those lower paying insurance companies, or what I like to look at is those insurance companies that string your payments along. that you provided all the documentations and they want to go ahead and send it to a consultant review. That they are dictating your treatment and saying that your number 30 crown could have been a number 30 composite. That's huge. Another thing that we coach and help clients take a look at is what is their psychographics, is what I like to call it, instead of demographics. Pulling a patient analysis report from their software, taking a look at what their insurance mix is. So once we've done that, we've determined the low paying or the poor paying insurance companies. Then we begin to set up a time frame of expectation. So 90 days, we're going to go ahead and cut out Exhibit A. Contact the patients, let them know we're going to move out of network, but that doesn't mean that we have to stop seeing you. This is what the relationship means that's going to change with your insurance company. This is what you can expect, but you can still continue to see us. Like you said, you are going to lose some patients, but when you've got that open communication and that clarity of expectations, it helps ease patients considerably.
Got it. I'm curious how you recommend announcing to a practice that you are dropping an insurance. That is pretty significant. So Delta being the big one, there's a number of different ways I've heard. I'm curious how you recommend practices go about doing that.
Announcing it to patients.
Yeah. Do you let them know on the phone when they call? Do you tell them when they come in that in 6 months you're not going to be in network anymore? But I also think it's interesting. So my wife plays tennis. She had the tennis team at our house yesterday, and I was talking to one of the women that was at the house, and she told me that she asked me if I knew a dentist down here that she can go see, and she was like, I went to see this practice, but they told me they were no longer accepting my insurance. And I said, well, I want to explain to you what that means. I don't even think patients understand that if you're not in network, it doesn't mean that you can't accept the insurance. So I had to explain it to her. And when I explained it, she goes, oh, maybe I will go back then, especially for hygiene. Hygiene, there's almost no out of pocket if you have just a regular PPO plan, if they're out of network. So one is how do you tell the patient, but two is how do you have the discussion to convince them to stay in the cases like that?
In cases like that, so number one thing, when you said we are no longer accepting your insurance, that to me translates we're no longer accepting you as a patient. And it's the same thing when a new patient calls and says, do you accept my insurance? And you say no. That's the very first thing that the patients hear. So one of the things that we coach is reinforcement of positivity and that their relationship is not going to change. We are now considered out-of-network providers for United Healthcare. And this is what that means. You'll go ahead and pay the practice. We're going to submit your claim. We're still going to do that process the same, but instead of United Healthcare paying us, they get to pay you directly and they will more than likely pay more money. Again, clarity in that entire scenario and removing insurance companies from the practice is key.
Got it. So let's finally talk about what NMG Practice Solutions does. So can you let the listeners and the viewers know kind of how you help practices?
So I am the accredited consultant of NMG. We help startups. We help doctors that have purchased, that are struggling, that are trying to find their niche, that they're trying to grow and move past that plateau. That's one side of the company. The second side of the company is we have a team that's dedicated to insurance outsourcing, whether it be insurance billing, patient AR, insurance verification, basically everything and anything insurance related that is time consuming.
Gotcha. Okay. So perfect timing with that. That puts us right where we want to be. Thank you for providing such great information to the audience. I want to transition a little bit now to the Q&A that I told you about, which is called an area called Pod Decks. And I'm going to read you these questions. The point of this, for those that haven't heard this before, answer very quickly and trying to come up with the best answer. Nothing inappropriate, though. Okay? So we're going to do about 8 to 10 of them. If you were to write a book about yourself, what would you name it?
Loyalty.
That was fast. Wow.
He's the best.
That was really fast. Do you believe there is some sort of pattern or formula to becoming successful?
Yes. Endurance.
What characteristics or skills are most important for leaders?
Listening, compassionate, and I would say humble.
Okay. What distracts you the most every day?
My dog.
Okay. If you had a magic stick, what are 3 things you would change in the world today?
Violence, I would say, for sure. More compassion in the world and understanding towards other individuals. And third one, that everybody has a fair opportunity to education.
Okay. What profession do you think is the most undervalued today?
Well, I want to say dentistry because I feel like the population doesn't understand dentistry.
Okay. Nothing wrong with that. What are you most excited about at work right now, and what keeps you up at night?
Most excited about work would be growth and our new website and video and audio that's been completed. That's pretty amazing. What keeps me up at night? To continue to carve the path that I've set out and determined to do in business and within dentistry.
Okay. Next question is, who is the one person you love to have as a mentor?
There is somebody here locally where I live that is a consultant underground. And he's behind the scenes and he's very old, and he's helped me considerably when it comes to my management role, when it has come to my consulting role, listening as a business owner, and helping more clients.
What business-related book has inspired you the most, or what is your favorite book that you recommend people read?
I think if you're new to this field, whether you're in management, whether you're a doctor, one of the books that I read was The Servant. And that was something that considerably taught me the art of listening and how important it was as a leader. So I would say go with that one.
Okay. All right. Describe Mondays for you in one word.
Hectic.
I knew you were going to say that too. That's funny. What is one subscription that you can't live without?
What pet Pandora? I got enough music. Yep.
Okay. And last question. What kind of shower ideas do you get?
That's going to be which glass of wine I should have before I go to bed.
Okay, that's a good idea there. So Lana, tell me what the best way is for someone who has listened to this podcast to reach out to you to find out if you can help them.
So easiest way, on my website, www.nmgpracticesolutions.com, there is a direct link to my calendar. You can go ahead and schedule at your convenience. Second would be shoot us an email.
And what is your email address?
The main one is info@nmgpracticesolutions.com.
Perfect. Anything, as we're finishing, anything else you want to say to the listeners and the viewers?
Thank you so much for listening and tuning in. If you're interested, go ahead and reach out. You guys will receive a 10% discount off of our services. And we're happy to help, even if it's just for a call looking for advice. And they should mention they heard about you on the podcast? That's correct. Perfect. Lana, this was great. Thank you so much for being a guest on the Raving Patients Podcast. If you like the episode, please make sure you share it. Tell your friends and colleagues about Lana and her services that she offers. If you will review us, if you'll download us, if you'll subscribe, do all these things, would be greatly appreciated. We're growing in leaps and bounds. Every month we have more viewers than the previous month, which is great. I don't really promote this any other way other than just when I speak and I talk to doctors about what I talk about. I promote my podcast that way, but I really appreciate it. Remember, about my event, you'll probably hear a little commercial about it as well. And as always, as I end these podcasts, remember, your reputation matters. Until the next episode, we'll talk to everyone soon.